Thank you very much, Mr. Gray. It's a great pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, and I beg to move that this House has considered the matter of the deportation of foreign national offenders. Let me start with a quote. "Never in the history of the world have there been so many migrants, and almost all of them are migrating from regions where nationality is weak or non-existent to the established nation-states of the West. They're not migrating because they've discovered some previously dormant feeling of love or loyalty towards the nations in whose territory they seek a home. On the contrary, few of them identify their loyalties in national terms, and almost none of them in terms of the nation where they settle." Mr. Gray, Roger Scruton wrote those words in 2004. I've often spoken of the generous and welcoming nature of the people of Redditch, my constituents. They've opened their hearts and their homes and shown love to strangers from Syria, Ukraine and all over the world. They're now our neighbours and our friends. But as a Conservative, I defend my right to tell the truth to the British people about the abuse of our homes and communities that is facilitated by some in our asylum and immigration system, in our courts and tribunals, in the name of kindness and virtue signalling. I'm choosing my words very carefully, Mr. Gray, because I know many will try to discredit my remarks. Note my use of the word some. It does not mean all. It might be a small number, but nevertheless the public expect us to take this seriously. Our critics attack us. They say it's heartless and cruel, or bizarrely far right, to believe that the people who've lived all their lives in our country should have a say in how many more people come to it, to aver that the people who come to our country should respect our laws, traditions and culture, and finally that if they don't, they should be sent back to where they come from. That's why I've secured this debate. According to the CPS, the number of foreign national offenders subject to deportation action living in the community has risen year on year for the last decade and has now reached nearly 12,000, a 192% increase from 2012. That's 12,000 criminals free to roam our streets while they exploit our legal system at taxpayers' expense to stay here longer. And as this number has climbed over the last decade, the number of people we are returning to other countries has fallen. The number of total enforced returns has dropped from 15,134 in 2012 to 5,506 in the year ending September 2023. Meanwhile, 10,321 FNOs are on the prison estate. According to MOJ figures, the average cost per prisoner in 2021 to 22 was £31,000 per year. Add to this the legal fees involved in getting them to prison in the first place. That figure runs into the hundreds of millions every year. We must raise our eyes and stop thinking that the United Kingdom is uniquely afflicted with this problem and that our own government is the only one battling. Every country around the world is dealing with spiralling immigration. None have ready solutions. All face the same issues of democratic consent. Take the EU. 2.3 million immigrants entered the bloc from non-EU countries in 2021, an increase of almost 18% compared with 2020. The tiny Italian island of Lampedusa, population 6,000, was last year overwhelmed by 7,000 migrants, more than its entire population. The EU does not have the answers. According to the UNHCR, at the end of 2022, 108.4 million people worldwide were displaced. This represents an increase of 19 million people wanting to leave their own country compared to the end of 2021, more than the populations of either Ecuador, the Netherlands or Somalia. Of course, many of these aspire to come to European nations in the West, including the UK, and we have always done our part in this country. In the UK, net migration has been a major component of population growth over the past 2 decades, making up 60% of the growth from 2001 to 2020. It is a fact of human nature, Mr. Gray, that not everybody is a good person. something that Jesus of Nazareth also knew. We'll come on to him. When numbers of immigrants rise, the vast majority, are good people, but proportionately more bad people will be among their number. In this country, we are open-hearted, generous and tolerant to those who treat us with respect and are willing to abide by our laws. But we have all seen the examples of people that we have welcomed to our homes who only wish to harm or kill us, our families and our communities. They are people who have no intention of returning the love and support we've shown them. And they've treated our country as a dormitory and sometimes as a cash machine to bring their relatives in by the back door. Our constituents are not naive. They know that people of any nationality are capable of sinning, lying and evil. But they do not expect our country to be an offshore prison facility for criminals from all over the world. They elect us to keep people safe in our bed at night and on our streets, to get foreign criminals out of our country and to let their own societies rehabilitate them. Every sovereign nation has the right to control its borders, and this is not far-right rhetoric, it is centre-ground common sense. So why, despite everything that the Conservative government have done, are the numbers going the wrong way? And I served as a minister, both in the Home Office and in the Ministry of Justice, and it's a true pleasure to have my colleague, the Right Honourable Member for Whittam, who it was my privilege to serve in the Home Office in the debate here today, and she will know, as I do, just how many obstacles exist. Despite the excellent people who work there, those obstacles exist to deporting people who should not be here. I think most people will be surprised to learn, for example, that foreigners convicted of crimes that attract sentences of less than 12 months can still be granted asylum and stay here. Why? Conservatives have done more than ever before to tackle the concerning rise in illegal migration and criminality and to clamp down on this merry-go-round of spurious asylum claims, but a thicket of legal instruments, treaties and conventions still exist, which give grounds for foreign national offenders to escape deportation. I know it's difficult, but we must do more. Now, a new loophole is emerging, ripe for exploitation. And I'm really genuinely worried about this, Mr. Gray. This is the fear of persecution if returned on the grounds of religious conversion, especially from Islam to Christianity. Every single person in this chamber, if they are truthful with themselves, can imagine the situation. You are a migrant on the Bibi Stockholm or in a British jail about to be sent back to Somalia. A nice legal aid lawyer or NGO appears in front of you with a script to follow and explains that a miracle can happen. Next thing, the light appears and you are a Christian. The prime suspect in the Clapham case was given asylum on the second time of asking, despite being charged with sexual assault and indecent exposure in 2018. He claimed he converted to Christianity, meaning he would have been at risk from persecution if he returned to Afghanistan. The suicide bomber who attacked Liverpool Women's Hospital, Ahmad al-Sweeman, had, following a failed initial asylum claim, converted from Islam to Christianity. I tried to find figures for how many other FNOs have evaded deportation because of this issue. I was unable to. I understand the Home Secretary is looking at this, so I'm sure the Minister can update us. Jesus understood compassion to foreigners and strangers, as we read in the Bible. The word refugee or asylum seeker doesn't appear anywhere in Holy Scripture. And who would in all seriousness argue that the world of the tribes of Israel in Egypt some 4 millennia ago was anything like the same as it is today? But Jesus was a student of human nature. He understood the temptation to lie. And we, as students of human nature and intelligent people in this place, we should be brave enough to acknowledge this. Only God can look into my heart and my personal Christian faith with all its flaws and know whether I believe in him or not. We are asking the impossible of our clergymen. They are not God. And to pretend that they are is the ultimate mass delusion. So do not gaslight us and say that this is not a situation ripe for abuse. Desperate people do desperate things. We should not, and I do not, and I emphasise this point, I do not blame the people, but the incentives and the policy structures that allow this to take place. Because the British people feel as I do. We feel that we have allowed ourselves to become taken advantage of. We have been quite literally killing ourselves with kindness. And if we continue this way, we risk eroding trust in our institutions and structures of government, the very things that we build our nation on. I don't know about you, Mr. Gray, but I was shocked to discover that the BBC has permitted their former employee to give evidence at immigration tribunals supporting 15 convicted Somalian criminals, including rapists. Out of this number, some have been given leave to remain in the UK after their trials and appeals based on her evidence. Do people pay their licence fee for this? What message does this send to the victims, some of them children, of these evil foreign thugs? I come now to the most important part of my speech. It is only conservative values, Mr. Gray, centred on our belief in a strong nation state that have any answers to this wicked problem. We are the only ones prepared to stand up and fight for our hard-won peace. And we are the only ones who are making progress, difficult though it is, over the longer term to fight to protect our democracy and our safety. Let's look at what the Labour Party is doing. Perhaps they have a plan as we approach the next election. What do we see when we look deeper? Members of the current Labour front bench, including the Right Honourable Member for St Pancras and Holborn, then campaigning to be the leader of the Labour Party, signed a letter calling for the suspension of a flight to deport 50 offenders to Jamaica and the suspension of all future charter flights. 151 Labour MPs and peers, as well as Liberal Democrats and those of other opposition parties and celebrities, signed the letter calling for the flight to be scrapped. It's hardly surprising, though, when they're led by someone who once claimed there was a racist undercurrent which permeates all immigration law. Among those who escaped deportation that day was heroin dealer Akiva Heaven, who'd already served 4 years in prison, went on to be jailed again in May 2021 for dealing cocaine and heroin. And if that wasn't bad enough, one of the criminals that the members of the Labour Party so generously campaigned on behalf of, Ernesto Elliott, went on to commit murder. I ask you, how can we ever trust them? These people who are only interested in a free ride on the virtue signalling train with their celebrity mates. They might try to persuade the British public that they've changed, but they are, and they remain, a risk to our national security. Now, I know exactly what they'll say. It's the easy attack, that it's all our fault. We've been in for 14 years. And I'm afraid, Mr. Gray, that perfectly demonstrates my point for me. That denial, the flat denial, this is a global, emergent and unpredictable threat, a new threat in many respects, tells the British people they have no serious plan to tackle it. And worse, they maintain the fantasy that all can be solved by talking in a nicer way to the EU. What we need is a cultural change. First, we must protect our homes and our families. Patriotism grows from the soil of trust. People who care about our country, no matter where they've come from, as their own, will put their lives on the line to defend it. Scruton speaks of the educated derision that has been directed at our national loyalty by those whose freedom to criticise would have been extinguished years ago had the English not been prepared to die for their country. And we all know who those critics are. The celebrity on a humanitarian crusade to boost their flagging career. Some of the institutions, including some in the Church of England, some of their leaders, some universities, some in the BBC. That ballooning charity, the legal aid and the NGO racket, who can burnish their compassion, credentials and bottom lines with a few clicks. I say to them, this is on you. You must take your share of responsibility. You are recklessly and dangerously tossing away our national inheritance, which has, as a German poet Goethe said, been laboriously earned by our forefathers from Christianity, imperial government and Roman law. So I call on the Minister and the Home Secretary to urgently revisit the legal frameworks underpinning the exemptions on grounds of religion and faith. And I ask the following questions to the excellent Minister, who is to be commended for the vigour and effectiveness he's brought to his brief. Why does he think we've seen a downward trend in the number of FNOs being deported, and what steps is he and the government taking to address this issue? How many have been granted asylum after being sentenced for a crime? Does he think that the current arrangements which permits those sentenced for under 12 months to be granted asylum is adequate? I want to thank everybody who's supported the debate today, and I finish by reminding ourselves that our generation has a solemn duty to our country. Goethe again. What you've inherited from your forefathers, earn it, that you might own it. Earning it, we will own it, and owning it, we will be at peace within our borders.
Hear, hear.